G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Welcome everyone. So I'm interviewing Frank Greef, who is the co-founder of Realbase, and which he sold a couple of years ago and was working at Domain, who purchased the business. Recently finished up there after a couple of years. So, and Frank's based in Sydney, Australia. So thanks for your time, mate.
Yeah, no drama. It's my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so we were just touching on it's sort of been a little bit of timing in coming aboard, which is great, and I really appreciate setting aside from time to have a chat. And you've got a fascinating story as a backdrop, which we won't necessarily go into detail today. But I guess many years ago you were a chef, and 2 years ago your business is bought out for $180 million, which is a great outcome for you and your family, and the whole story that sort of went before it. So I heard you and the story on Tim Reed's podcast, as it turned out, and reached out to you. So here we are today. So I guess just to, again, for context, tell the audience just a bit about the business Realbase to kick things off.
Yeah, awesome. So where it was at the day of the sale, so I guess like where all the iterations landed us and ultimately what got us to where we wanted to get to was Realbase is an online marketing platform which helps real estate agents every time they market a property. So what most people don't know is that when a property in Australia, New Zealand goes live, you might interact with 8 to 12 different suppliers, whether they be, realestate.com, domain, signboards, photography, brochures. So what we did is we just aggregated all those suppliers through a platform and allowed the real estate agents to facilitate the marketing transaction each time by ordering from the suppliers, pricing it up, doing the artworks, and then ultimately, to the point of completion.
Yeah, nice. So certainly you built a business where there was obviously great value, particularly from Domain, and you've worked through that. So that's awesome. So how did you start out in the business?
Yeah, so about 12 years ago, roughly thereabouts, my brother was a real estate photographer. So he took photos of houses each time they went for sale. And one day he just asked me, there's an opportunity to go install real estate signboards. Because he'd heard through the clients that that's something they needed. And really simply from there, a few weeks later, we bought a signboard printer and we literally just started installing signboards. So it's a very physical services-based business. It had nothing to do with technology in the beginning.
Yeah, right. And then it just evolved over those 12 years to where it is today.
Yeah, so what happened is, the more we learnt about the process that the supplier goes through, because we were one, the more we realized that there was kind of gaps in the market and other suppliers experienced exactly the same challenges. And I was really fortunate, my eldest brother, who I started the business with, and ultimately my middle brother, who also was part of the business, he was a software engineer. He taught himself how to code from the age of 14 or 15. He's much more intelligent than I, but he we saw that gap. And so he started to code the software to kind of figure out how to make it something that other suppliers might be able to interact with. But ultimately, more importantly, was how to make these real estate agents and their process easier so that it would be better for the consumer who's selling their home.
Yeah, good one. So I guess the key thing for our listeners obviously is you saw a gap, and as a result, you're able to, I guess, have a point of difference from the business perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the key for like a takeaway for people is, where your business starts is very often not where it's going to end. And one of the interesting things is starting in a service-based business and then getting a really deep understanding of the processes that are involved puts you in a very interesting spot because you know what a lot of people don't know. So if we started and we went, we're going to become a technology company for real estate agents, we wouldn't know the problems we were solving. But because we were living and breathing the problems every single day, and we had, maybe 20, 30 clients by the time we started to build the software, we knew exactly what we were needing to solve because ultimately we're almost solving the problem for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Understand the problems you're looking to solve. Are you in a position to share some key numbers to show the growth of the business? For example, sales from, so you started at zero,
Yep.
and to where that was when you sold, and also sort of full-time equivalent employees?
Yeah, for sure. So I was 20 years old. I had no idea about business. We used to joke and say we're making the shit up as we go, which is kind of the reality. We had no idea what we were doing. So for the first 4 years, it was really slow from zero to about, I think the year 4, we cracked $1 million in revenue. But then things started kind of really ramping up. And so when we launched the technology, we went head to head with a competitor who had, similar-ish technology, who'd been in the space for 20 years. We'd taken 30% of the market share. I was the sales team of one. And then we went, we got to about $4.5 million, and that was in about year 6 or 7. We did a 50-50 merger with them because we'd applied enough pressure. And they were 8 times the size of us from a revenue perspective. So in year 8 or 9, we went from $4.5 million to overnight with the merger to about $40 million in revenue. We went from a team of 40 team members to 400. So if you look at it on a graph, it's not like a exponential curve. It's a very nice linear curve.
Yep.
And then one day there's just this huge jump up, which is like an overnight change.
Yes, okay.
With that is great, because it's like you all of a sudden all the numbers are big, but it also meant we missed out on a few of those learning opportunities, So the things you learn from 0 to 1 million are very important, but very different lessons that you learn from 1 to 4. And no doubt from 4 to 40, there's a lot of learning that was along the way. We had to throw ourselves in the deep end. That was the time I became CEO, from 4 million to 40 million overnight. And so we kind of had to, almost reverse engineer and learn them along the way. At scale, and we had to very quickly figure out how to play at that level. And ultimately, those are roughly the numbers when we sold to Domain, was roughly around there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, as you say, it's an interesting point that when there is a merger or some buyer like that, then there is the risk of missing that. There's a gap in the learnings and having to backtrack. So that's a really good point.
But then to challenge myself too is also you get to learn a new series of skills which you wouldn't have learned. So what I had to learn was what does it look like to bring on a business that was 20 years old, that had all of these kind of more corporate structures, and try and bring in the startup, young, when I say young, I don't mean age, but young, like mind thinking, and try and bring that in. And so it was only within 12 months that we fully changed that, rebranded the business. We had to figure out how to bring businesses together and bring people aligned to a single mission rather than being enemies. So there's like a whole series of skills that we got to learn because we made that leap.
Yeah, and was one of the challenges around the culture of the two different organizations?
Definitely. Like, it's a very different culture. Some of the team members, which are amazing team members, they'd been working for the business longer than I'd been in business, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you've got this, at the time I was 27 years old, I'm now the CEO, and I have, people that are either reporting into me or somewhere in the organization that have been in that business for anywhere from 10 to 20 years. And if you take the person as an example who's been in business for 20 years, and me, I was in primary school 20 years ago. So so there's that layer, which is trying to build respect really, really quickly to be able to work as a cohesive team. There's also just the different way of thinking. And so what we have to do is kind of go, it's not us versus you. We have to rebuild what are the values as a collective, what are the mission and goals as a collective, what's our new brand, so that we weren't trying to bring the baggage. Instead, we were trying to create fresh as a collective.
Yeah, right. And is there any sort of key aspects of that you can think of that help drive the coming together of the cultures?
For sure. I think the number one, was, and funnily enough at the time, I thought, this is such a corporate thing and it doesn't make sense, but it really did in the end, was values. What does it stand? What is a business? The business we merged with, they had their own values. Our business, Real Hub, we did not. And why didn't we? Well, when you're a team of 40 people and the 3 founders that you bring the business, like the way you interact with the team, the way you see you drive every single day to get customer outcomes. They see and feel that, and so you don't need to write it on the wall because they can see it and it's touchable and tangible. Whereas when you're at a team of 400 and you're scaled across 3 countries, well, you're not going to be everywhere at all times. So you need to figure out how to do it together. So what we did is, rather than say, these are the values, we essentially crowdsourced from our entire organization to go, okay, here are the 10 to 12 things we think we stand for. What does everybody resonate with the most? And so as a collective, everybody got to essentially vote on what they believe the business stands for and what they as an individual believe in. And so these small little gestures to bring everybody along in the process meant that when it came to an outcome, it wasn't like, oh, now I just have someone else's values. It's like, oh no, we all collectively made a decision. And those are small little moments in the process of merging that then meant at the end, I had a litmus test, which was when you're at a barbecue and your friend asks you, where do you work for? If the person says the old company names, I've failed. If the person says the new company name, which is the merged brand, I've been successful.
Yes.
And so I had to do things that made people think, this is who I'm part of. I'm part of this fresh new business. So it's like different steps to get there.
Yeah, no, it's certainly, they can't be underplayed, the importance of values in business, and particularly growing, and moreover in the circumstances like you confronted. So yeah, good to hear that story and it was successful. So when was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Yeah, I think I couldn't tell you there's any one particular clincher, but I think, 12 months, within 12 months of the merger, our new brand was established. The team members, it felt like everybody was aligned to that new brand. We had a single mission, values, goals. Our platforms started to become integrated into one another. We'd shifted team members from like that business and this business into the business as a collective. And I feel like that was the point in time where ultimately I then decided to take the business to a sale, was when I felt comfortable that we were merged and together. And so I think it took about 12 months. Which is pretty fast, but it's because we worked very hard, and that was kind of one of the biggest ticket items to get solved for. And so I reckon 12 months would be like roughly the time where I felt that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and what does success look like?
Yeah. I mean, success was a very simple metric, which was when people in the organization are talking about things as simply as which team do you work for, or which business do you work for, and they recalling the old business name, that's not successful. So it was a pretty rogue, random test, but that to me was like, it was in the language that I felt was really important, because once the language is like that, it removes. It's no longer us and them. Us and them. It's us as a collective.
Yeah.
And the same goes on the customer side. When the customer is interacting with our website, which was Realbase, rather than the individual products, which was RealHub and Campaign Track, I knew the brand from an external perspective was working.
Yeah, no, good point. And what's the number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
So here's the thing. I think if I answered that, it would have to be, you would have to watch out for me, because there's no one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
So every business is unique. So if you're in business to business or business to consumer, it's so different.
Yes.
And so what's my number one thing I recommend? Well, I to be honest, I actually start with fully understanding your customer and fully understanding the problem you're solving before you're doing any marketing particular channel, is what I'd start with and recommend. And then, now let me break it up, because I also want to give something tangible. If you're in business to business, I think our customers, we knew exactly who they were, the brands they worked with, the problems we were trying to solve. Like I mentioned, it was, LJ Hooker, McGrath, Ray White. And so when we did our online marketing, whether it be social media advertising, email marketing, we had approvals from those brands to actually use their logos, their colors, their assets in the format of our emails and the social media. So for example, a real estate agent who's part of Ray White, they saw our ad and it's in their brand. It means that we already have a leg up, because everybody else is doing it in a generic, someone else's brand. Right? Now, not everybody can do that, but the reality is, the main point I was trying to, how do I make it feel that when I'm advertising a product, it feels like it was designed exactly for you? And so from a business to business perspective, I think that is a far more superior way to market than doing something that's a generalized offer. Because business to business, often you have bigger contract sizes and they're long and sticky. And so, you can spend a bit more time to really tailor it to individual businesses rather than having something generic.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Did you use any tools or like a net promoter score, I guess, as far as sort of measuring client experience? And
yeah, for sure. So I couldn't tell you what the tool was. We did track NPS scores on all. So every single month we would have somewhere around approximately 40,000 tickets come. So it was very high touch industry. So 40,000 tickets come. We have a team of about 170 customer service people firing off tickets all day, every day. So we would track that. I'm always slightly nervous that needs to be just one of the ways you capture data, because if I think about myself as an individual, I couldn't tell you how many times I've ever completed a survey. Now, I might really like a business or really not like it, but it's just me as an individual. I'm just that kind of person who there's a bit going on, and so therefore I'm not going to complete it. And so you got to use that as a one point. And I think often, especially like business to business side, you have clients and relationships. I'm a big believer in you need to get a temperature check in person or on the phone and truly ask the right questions to find out how you're doing. And so, yes, it's not a tool as such, but it's more around a toolkit in your language. So let me help again, boil it down, make it tangible for someone to take away. There's a difference between how you ask question and the outcome you're going to get from the end of it. So if someone says, "Hey, how did you like our service?" or "Were you happy with our service?" and that's a binary question. It's a yes or no. So I'm just going to say most of the time yes, and that's not very helpful. So instead, the way in which I trained our team to ask the question is, if there's one thing you could change about our business, what would it be? Now, the reframe and the asking of the question means the only way you can respond is giving you one thing. It also gives you complete permission to go to almost, let's call it a negative response. And so because some people are worried, they get a bit scared to say, they just say, "Yes, I'm happy." But if I said, if there's one thing you could change, it's really tangible and I go straight to that response. And the other way to do it is, if there's one thing that you would recommend about our business to someone else, what would that be? So just slight language shifts will give you much more powerful responses to be able to work from that.
yeah, that's a great tip. No, thanks for that. And so how did you fund the business through those years?
Yeah, so we, again, based on the age, not having knowledge of what the business world looked like, we didn't really know about a thing which was private equity. So we just thought business was fundamental. You grew your revenue. You had to keep some profit. You paid yourself as little as you could, and you reinvested your profits. So we bootstrapped. We had no funding right until the exit point. So we retained full ownership of the business. Of course, when we merged, we diluted 50-50. But we used the earnings of the business to fund the business. Right. And so for the first 7 years, myself and my two brothers paid ourselves the max salary we got to was $50,000, because we just used every dollar, at the end of every year, we would try and make sure we, made as little profit as possible through making smart purchases. So therefore we could defer the tax, the tax liability come right at the end. So don't worry, I paid a nice tax bill. But we at least got the compound effect of, if every year I've got profit and I'm carving off 23.5 cents or 27 cents on the dollar, over time, that's going to hurt me on a long term. So instead, I'll keep my tax implications as low as possible. I make my personal earnings as low as possible, so we can compound the gains over the long term. And apart from that, I think we got a $50,000 overdraft facility from a bank. Again, banks weren't really that interested in giving money out to a couple of young kids. So we didn't really get that much, external capital.
Yeah, right. Did you access any government grants?
We did do the R&D grants.
Yep.
But the quantum was very low.
Right.
And the time it took us to do it as individuals back then was almost made it not that worth it. But it was from a reduction in tax, it probably made a 50 to 100 grand difference, which at the time, it was a reasonable amount of money spent over the 3 years we claimed it.
Yeah, all helps, right?
It all helps. That's right.
Yeah, and it's sometimes grants are often overlooked by businesses, so I think it's
Sure. Well,
a
these
good
days
one to.
people go straight to that. It's all about chasing the next round of funding, specifically the tech market. I'm sure there's many people who are listening who are maybe in the services industry. It's not very common, but in the tech and product space, it feels like it's all about your next round of funding more than it is about getting to profitability.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Well, I have a 7-year non-compete, so no.
Well, aside from that,
aside from here's the thing. What would be the smartest thing to do? We'll put that in inverted commas.
Yep.
Smartest thing is probably you've built up a network over 12 years. You have all these client contacts, and it's so easy to walk back in the door and sell, provided your product is good. So that's probably the smart play, is to stay in the industry. My brain just doesn't work like that, because I just like the idea around learning and new challenge and new market. It keeps my brain stimulated. The reality is I can't just think about the number, for us to be more stimulating above and beyond that. Now, of course, like, I'm commercial, right? Like, I'll be the first to say it. Like, I like cash. I'm not ashamed to say it. So it needs to be commercially viable, but it needs to come with a series of learning. So I think, for me, regardless of a non-compete or not, I want to enter a new sector, because it's going to come with all of these new things that I don't know today. And then, at the other end of that business, I'm a different person again. I think one of the things that's often overlooked, there's a reason that like 85% of people who win the lottery end up spending in 5 years, because they didn't get the lessons that learnt to earn that kind of money. So they don't know how to keep that kind of money. Where when you do a business, regardless of the end state outcome, the person who you are when you start to the person you exit is very different. So like when I was 20 years old, I am fundamentally a different person than I am today. And it's those learning lessons that I love. And so I need to go into another industry to gain more insights, more learning. What does it look like to market to a consumer? What is it? There's so many questions that are unanswered. I would love to be able to, figure out an answer.
Yeah. You love a challenge, obviously.
Yeah. Until you're in the challenge.
Yeah.
I hate this.
And what about your most stressful point in the growth journey?
There's quite a few. I've touched on them before in the past. I'm trying to think of something that's unique and different. I'll probably just share something that's kind of, it helps the audience, because we're all in a similar position when we think about starting a business. The stressful piece is all relative. So, if I look back to year 2, what was stressful to us, now I get to laugh about it, because I'm like, oh, that's so cute that got you stressed out. And it's the same. I was in a meeting, and I had the opportunity to sit in with the managing director of Optus, and the managing director of SBS, and all these really big businesses with 7,000 employees, and they're talking about things like the cyber attack and these big things, and I'm like, wow, like I just didn't experience that. But then I realized it's all relative, right? So the difference is, as a CEO or someone who's a high flyer in a corporate business, most of the time, provided you're not being fraudulent or doing illegal activity, the total quantum of loss that you can incur, I use most of the time, so no one can drill into me. There's plenty. I'm sure there's other things, but most of the time, the total cost is your job, right? So your job, maybe a bit of shame or whatever, a bit of ego bruise, but you can get another job. As a business owner, and I assume mostly what people hear today, the total cost can be you go bankrupt. You have to sell the family home, or potentially you don't have one, like I didn't until we exited. You can't get a mortgage for 5 years. So even though the particular thing isn't as large, you don't have a data leak of 10 million, right? But that thing means you can't get a mortgage, and like it could be deep implications for you and your family. So everything's relative. So then let me share like a story relative to us is, when we had a team of 40 people, there came a time where the real estate market was incredibly depressed, and for no factor of our own in terms of the market saw I think it was like a 60% reduction in total transactions. They got to a space where we had like 6 weeks of liquidity left in the bank. And because we didn't have any bank capital, no external funding, it meant, we essentially planned out, if you will, our demise, which was, okay, in 6 weeks' time, the doors close, and we've got all of these leases and all of these things which are going to be liabilities on us, and we're going to be bankrupt. And from there, we dropped our personal salaries down to $0 so that we could keep our team members in the game, because obviously having them in the game, one, built trust that they knew we wouldn't just drop them, but two, meant we could get out of the hole because we had people to be able to help us get it out. And that was, easily one of the most stressful times, because you just don't know. And then, like, thankfully, we got out of that. But there's also times where it be family. We have challenges where I work with my two brothers. It's obviously that people can understand it's not always going to be hunky dory, and there was times there where it felt like the family was going to break up. And I'd say emotionally, that was the hardest part. When you add an emotional layer into business, it makes it quite complex, because you can't just solve logically step by step by step. You now have multiple feelings in the game, and that makes things a little bit cloudy.
Yeah, it certainly makes that when there's those emotions that get in the way, isn't there? Particularly when, as you say, it's family, particularly. Yeah. What area in business do you feel you had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Well, here's the thing. Everything, given the context of when I started, but I guess, that's not very helpful for people, is what I had to do is I had to essentially, some things came natural to me. So although my first sales meeting, I was sweaty palmed, nervous as everything, talking to people felt like a natural, I would get good at some stage. And so I had to learn how to do it, but then have like rigor around it to become a salesperson. So that's, that would be one of the biggest things that I worked on that had a disproportionate return on investment. Yeah. So what I mean by that is my role changed from sales, from installing signs, but then, salesperson to CEO. I thought about it like I was externally selling as a salesperson. So how do I get my potential customers to feel the energy, feel the vision, feel the dream, and want to come on board? And then as CEO, I was no longer selling to customers, but I had to use that same sales skills internally. So, my role turned into, how do I each day motivate, excite, articulate the vision and the dream of the business, so that I had people who were, all pushing in the right direction to get us to the end outcome. And then there was things that were just gaps for me that I just never really worked on, because I realized that those things are like, they take my energy rather than give me energy. And those are like administrative tasks, anything, I'm actually really bad at deep work, so something that came really easy to my brothers, Ken and Jacques, they could sit in front of a computer screen and write code for 9 hours, eat their chicken and broccoli in a Tupperware, drink a couple of Coke Zeros and have some water, and that'd be sweet. I like, my brain can't, like, I find it hard to sit for longer than an hour. So did I try and work on that? No, I just got up and did my thing, and I would be pacing around the office when I'm on the phone. It's just who I am. And sometimes, know your weakness as an individual, and as a business, solve for that through the people that you hire.
Yeah, that's a good tip and good insight. So what did you enjoy the least about managing the fast growth?
What did I enjoy the least? You know what? When I hear that, I think about it's all those tough times, but then I go, but you'd never swap them, because those are the things that grew you as a person. Right. So it's back to the emotional layer, and not just think about the brothers, but there's times in business where you've got challenging problems, whether they be the way in which a customer is communicating with you or the team, and you feel you're putting your heart and soul into it. And so when you hear it, it crushes you, like, emotionally. And so I'd say that the hardest thing for me was like juggling that, like, the emotional piece, because that's always where things got challenging for me. It was when something was an emotional layer on top of already challenging circumstances. But I would never take that away, because those are the pieces that grow you. Now it takes a lot these days in business to shake me emotionally, compared to what it did. So you need those things to stretch you. And I think that's probably just the most important thing. Like, anybody listening, you're going to be going through something. We always go through something in business that right now feels like kind of like the end of the world. And we had so many of those, often multiple times a year, that feels like in the time of crisis. But 1, 2, 3, 10 years later, you get to really laugh at that, provided you stay in the game and you stay pushing, because you'll grow so much. And then you get thrown that same thing 3 years later, it's like nothing. You just move right on.
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective. And what did you love most about growing the business?
Yeah, so like I reflect a lot these days, and maybe it's I think it's the same as when I was in business, but like I now know, I guess, what my superpower is, and what I love, and that is when a business is at a certain number of people, that's where my value kicks in, and that's where I love it the most. Because for me, what I love the most is when I know I'm contributing and we're working as a team. That's the best for me.
Mm.
So what the superpower is like, I have the ability that I'm pretty good at picking talent. So knowing who are the people in the business that get a disproportionate amount of my time. And my time is spent on bettering their skills, and focusing through coaching to get them to perform the best and inspiring them to be the best versions of themselves they can be. And there's a really rewarding thing about seeing an individual grow, seeing talent in them that they don't see, helping them grow. But then, of course, from like a selfish commercial business perspective, you have more people who are pushing harder in business and doing better. So it's a total win-win. But like that's definitely the thing that I love the most, is being able to work with high-performing people and push their capabilities up and their knowledge up a lot more than they think they can do in a shorter period of time.
Mm. And at the end of the day, like, your experience is a catalyst for growth, right? Because one, you can't be doing everything, so you need to empower everybody.
You absolutely can't.
Yeah. And what was the biggest mindset shift for you in that growth journey?
Again, I couldn't tell you one moment where things changed, because there was like, I was both just growing up as a human as well as the business.
Yeah.
All these different things. I think the biggest mindset shift change was that point in time where I realized, all the small businesses, the language that was used often was, if you want something done right, you do it yourself.
Yep.
Right? That is awesome when you have a team of 3 people. But at some point, either there needs to be a succession plan, or you want to grow above and beyond that, or you want to go on holidays. And if you haven't put the rigor in place to make sure that the people around you are empowered to execute, you will forever have a business that is, 1, probably not going to be able to be sold, and 2, not going to be able to be grown. And so I had a shift in my mindset, realizing that me as an individual, I have a total capacity of 100%. That 100%, I can't work longer hours, I can't do more, I can't execute more than 100%. Right? So if I'm today working at 90% and I add more things to my plate, I have a 10% potential uplift I can create in myself. Then you have a team. And let's say, for the people listening, you have a team of 10 or a team of 15 or a team of 5. If you can take your team, who you might have the perception today they're working at a 60%, if you can help them uplift from 60 to 80%, and you do that across 5, 10, 15 people, as a total quantum of uplift in your business, it's far more significant than you just increasing your capacity. And so that mindset shift came for me when I realized my most important dollar productive activity I could do is uplift the skills and capabilities of people around me. That's when things got really, really interesting, because you start to realize that like you can achieve a lot more if you can have, for me, it was 20, 30 people in my close circle, and I can help bring them up.
Yeah, that's a fantastic insight, and to your point, the compound effect can be massive, can't it? And what's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
It's 2 parts to the similar coin: adaptability to change and pace. So I'm going to use the word thesis to make myself sound much smarter than I am. I have a thesis in my mind, which is the compound effect of decision-making over time.
Yep.
So just like we talked about the compound effect of not paying tax every single year so you can grow your business, if you take a macro lens over a business mind, 12 years, and you said the average person takes, for a big decision, whether it be a new product, a pricing change, a pivot in the business, the average person takes, for easy math, 6 months to make these big decisions. And I can make that same decision in 1 month. As I look over it at a macro sense, I go, okay, these decisions are made so quickly over the long period of time, I'm far more likely to be much further in my business than someone else who has a slower decision-making process.
Yep.
And so it's something I'm incredibly passionate about, because now, since finishing up, I work with a lot of different businesses who are either in the early stage, just about to launch, or they're in that scaling up phase. And I see that, advice or feedback or their knowledge, I want to make this product, the decision can take so long. I've worked with people that new business idea, they're in the year 3 and they haven't launched. Whereas, well, what if you launched 2 years ago with a down-scoped version of your idea? You would be so far ahead. And then compound that over the long term. So pace and then adaptability to change. So why is that important? Well, if you're making quick decisions, the reality is you might not make the right perfect decision. And so you need to be comfortable to change very quickly and pivot away from that. So you need to do a decision fast, but then test and measure, was that the right decision? And if it wasn't, great, make another decision and pivot quickly.
Yeah, that's a good habit, and totally agree.
Want specific advice to help you get your business through its #1 growth challenge? Book a free 20-minute growth chat with me, Troy, the founder of Grow a Small Business. I'll recommend some resources which will help you grow your business with ease so you can live the lifestyle you've signed up for. Go to growasmallbusiness.com and click on Growth Chat.
Can you talk about how you added people to the team, which obviously over a period of time there was quite a few ultimately? Just some wins, mistakes, and advice.
Yeah, no worries. So as a role of being a CEO, I thought of one of the most important things that I could do was around how do I attract, find, and keep the best talent.
Yep.
So really boil everything down in business, like really, really boil it down. If you have the right person in the right seat for the long term, you can win, right? So that's quite simply it. So I went to almost every job interview for like the first 8 or 9 years. So even when we were a merged business, there would be weeks where I'd be doing 15 job interviews. Was that the right best thing? I don't know, but I did it. And it's because I wanted to get a sense of that person. I also wanted them the first time they interact with our business to be from, someone who could inspire them and get them excited. And then also train people how, my interviewing process worked. So first off, I think from my side, it's something I wouldn't outsource too early, because I think it's a superpower if you can get it really, really good. The next is, okay, well, what's a tip on how to do it better? For me, it was around the types of questions I would ask and the feeling I would be making that person have in the room. That was probably the most critical piece. So when I'm doing an interview, I wouldn't just follow a series of the exact same questions, 25 questions, make them feel uncomfortable, because I need to actually figure out, like, peel back the onion layer. Am I getting the version of the person they want me to see, or am I getting a better sense of who they truly are?
Yep.
And so I would use questions that would make them have to think a bit differently. So for example, we all know the question, like, what's your biggest strength? Okay, great. So one might be, when you're truly honest with yourself, what's the one thing that lets you down in business? Now, most often people are prepared for that, and they give you some, for lack of a better word, bullshit answer about a weakness that's actually a strength. Like, I'm too much of a perfectionist. I've heard that so many times, right? Cool. Then I would say, amazing. And what would be your second? Now, they haven't prepared for that one, and they're having to think on the fly. And often the second is their true weakness, and that's where I actually get to learn about them. So I'm making sure my questions are not just, I haven't just Googled, job interview questions. I'm thinking about things a layer deeper, and I'm getting people to have to, they're on their toes a bit and they weren't prepared for it. That's where you get to see the real version of the person they are.
Yeah, it's a great initiative, and I'd imagine it, and it worked most of the time.
Oh, it caught everybody off guard. But I wasn't trying to do that to like freak them out. But I was trying to do it because, again, I need to know, like, there's 1 hour. It's really hard to get to know someone in an hour, but I need to figure out what are the things I can do to peel back one layer of onion so I can actually get to the closest version of the real person before I make a decision.
Yeah, no, that's great. And what are some things you'd recommend to building, as we call it, a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with growth?
Culture is a really big part of our business. I think, in the early days, the culture was just, again, people in the same room as us, and they felt the energy, they felt the enthusiasm, they felt the care for the customer. For me, culture, it's like, it's not the ping pong table and that stuff like that, the kind of stuff. It's like what does that person say about you, the business, and the customer when you're not in the room?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of it, right? Like, so is the culture of the business that when we're at the water cooler, we're talking shit about someone in the business, or is it that they're talking positively? And, one of the most common things we would get in a job interview was, I know Sally or I know Steve, and they can't stop talking amazingly about this business. And I had to come and do a job interview, right? So that was part of my attracting talent strategy, was like, people who have a referral from someone because they couldn't stop talking about Realbase at a barbecue, you're going to get some great talent through that. So how do you build and how do you maintain? I think it's like, it has to be grounded in authenticity. So, someone might hear this, I'm just not an excitable character. Frank is very enthusiastic. He can't sit still. I'm not that person. Okay, great. But you are something. You have your own things that are unique to you. So you have to stay in those strengths. You have to stay where you are. But then the key part that everybody can have is like, you have to care about that individual at a deeper level than just, they're coming to work. I ask them about their weekend. I don't really care. They don't really care. And then we go and work. So let me make that tangible. One of the things I had was, I realized that everybody's a human in my business. And those people that are kind of, in my inner circle, and how do I make sure I build that long-term rapport? I cared about them more than just in the office day to day. And so I had people on my team which were doing a side hustle, as an example. They were starting their next business, their side business venture. Now I have business skills, so I can add value there. So one of the things I would do is each week I would say, what is it can I do to help your side hustle? And how can I help keep you accountable that you're pushing that forward? Now, what does it say about me? Well, it says, Frank's helping me that I could potentially leave this company. So there's this really feeling of like, oh, he actually cares. But then again, from like the selfish business interest, I also knew that person would go and talk to other people in the business, like, wow, I just had like a business coaching session with Frank and he's helping me with this. That is a very powerful thing to keep that person very engaged in the business. So I think the layer deeper of like caring about an individual and watching how you talk about customers and other people in front of your team goes a really long way to build a culture where people actually like genuinely care and are excited to come to work.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm a big one on that sort of care factor, and I think too many business owners don't acknowledge or don't understand that. And it's like, sometimes you talk about it to business owners and they talk about, well, I can't be friends with them, but it's not about being friends, is it? It's just about, showing care and getting to know them, understand them, and which sometimes gives context when things don't go right.
Exactly. And understand their why, right?
Yes.
Like, everybody's coming to business because they want to make the maximum amount of money. But if they do, that's great. How can I help you get there? Some people are coming because it's a single mom or a single dad who needs to put food on the table. So what's important to them is having flexibility and picking up the kids from daycare. Great. Like, knowing a person's why, I can then help shape where can I add value to your life that I know you're going to reciprocate back to me in the day to day.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the biggest challenges in growing a business is getting your life and work balance right. And I mean, I'm one to talk about the interaction, because I think just the DNA of business owners it is part of their life. So there's no point, not acknowledging that. So I guess it's the interaction, making sure your life doesn't get out of balance. So how did you handle that, or did you? And what's some insights you can provide our listeners?
So there's like almost two schools of thought here where people talk about this. One is like the hustle culture, and it's about many hours if you can pack into 7 days as possible, continued forever. Great. Yeah. The other one is like the 4-hour work week. It's about optimizing your business to make it that it's passive. Great. I took an approach which was it's in seasons. So you're going to go through a season, which you're going to have to work and throw things by the wayside. You can't do the activities with the friends on the weekend. You're going to have to get behind your desk at 5 a.m. You have to leave at 6 p.m. Great. But when that season leaves, I'm not going to just stay behind my desk and get there early and not do friend things just because. I'm going to take a bit of balance or disproportionate balance in that time. So it was like by understanding that this season will come to an end on both directions, gave me kind of mental balance, knowing that, okay, this is just for a period of time. I think that was the most important. It's not one or the other. Now, you could argue, yeah, but Frank, but imagine if you did 7 days, 70 hours for the whole time, maybe it would have been a big outcome. Definitely. But me as a human, I would have broken down. I would have not had the energy to continue, and maybe I would have jumped off the game of business earlier, jumped out. So what worked for me is not going to work for someone else. So what worked for me was thinking about things in blocks and seasons. Some of those times might be as long as 6 months. The selling of the business was a 12-month long season. I got almost to its end. I went through insomnia, 3 days. I multiple breakdowns where I was crying to my wife, like all of those things. But I knew that season would come to an end, and I was going to be prepared for the other side when it came time.
That's a good way to put it. And as much that's about self-awareness and understanding that. And, like you said, I guess the communication with your wife in that instance is so important, right? So, because she's got to come along with the journey with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Have a towel on my shoulder for my tears.
Well, you got that. So what about professional development? Have you invested much in that over the years?
So in terms of money, not really. I've once bought an online training program from a guy called Grant Cardone called Cardone University, which is a sales program. It was the best $2,500 I've spent in my life, and that taught me how to sell. Amazing. The rest was just consuming books, audiobooks, podcasts, and people's content continuously forever. So then to the question of I've invested a lot of time. I invest time today. Yesterday I was driving. A piece of content could be really relevant for someone who's starting a business and fresh business tomorrow, but I'm still and consuming it because I want it to be in my vocabulary. I want to learn about it. So I always just think about the learning, which is what do I need to know today that's going to help me tomorrow? And so often that is contextual to where I need to get to. So as my role changed to CEO and I needed to better lead team members, I read, Coaching for Performance, a 20-hour book on how to coach people to get the best out of their skill sets, learning from tennis coaches, et cetera, et cetera. So it was continual, but that's because I'm a bit of a freak and I love that stuff and it's the stuff that gets me, pumped up. So I always want to continually kind of sharpen that sword to figure out how can I get better? How can I do better?
I think I think you need that mentality in business if you want to be successful, at least, to be continually learning and, like you say, in different lanes or different aspects of business. So, yeah,
I mean, there's a school of thought which goes in my head, which is like, if I expect this business to grow, let's say double in the next 12 months, then my role as a leader, I need to double my skills in the next 12 months. Because how can I continually manage something at the scale if my skills aren't growing at the same time? So like the moment you kind of stop growing your skills, it's like, okay, that's almost like you're ready for your business to remain at that number, or it's going to grow and it's going to grow away from you and you won't be able to manage it, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. What about mentors or coaches along the way?
I would, the best way to describe is like digital coaches and digital mentors through the knowledge of learning and listening to audiobooks. So I was so young that I didn't even realize there was such a thing. And also I had in my mind, why would someone who's done the business want to hear from this 23-year-old? And so like, I never had any of those like actual tangible people. But there's so much content online, especially in 2024, that like you don't really need to actually have someone physically talk to you. Get back to Alex Hormozi, is like he has so much content there. You can consume that literally for like 10 hours a week. It literally drops like 10 hours a week of content for a year, and you can learn so much before you even open your mouth and ask them a question.
It's a good point. I only heard that recently in the podcast as well about that, the concept of essentially digital mentor with podcasts and the like. And like you say, there's so much you can get out of it. And to your point, it is horses for courses, right? So depending on where you want to learn, if there's a lane you want to get better at or the like, could be digital, could be someone in person, but whatever works for you. So did you was there a board of directors or advisors involved in the business over the
Uh, Not really. Until the merger, it was myself and my two brothers
Mm,
would work in it. There's a concept called asynchronous work, like asynchronous meetings.
yep.
Just rather than in your diary Tuesday at 10 a.m. 1 hour, it would be when the moment was needed or the moment you felt creative or there's a challenge to solve, we would stand up and just, often just yell at each other. Is that the way to say it? It works really well for us. So we get robust discussion at the right time because sometimes you have a meeting in the diary and you go to the meeting, you're not feeling it, and
Yeah.
you still the hour, but you weren't as productive as you would be when you were actually feeling it. Now, as your business grows and you have more team members, you can't really do that all the time. So when we merged the business, we had a board, but it's not really a board. It was the 10 shareholders in a room, which is not really a board. 10 sort of crowd for a board. And we didn't have any advisors until the time we took the business transaction. And that was quite simply an advisor on the deal.
So how did that go as far as the shareholders in a meeting? Was it functional?
I took myself and the CFO and another guy called Tim. I was in 100% of the meetings for the deal, CFO maybe in 50, 60, and Tim in roughly the same, where we sheltered all the rest of the sharedholders. So it would be just me back at like a board level to let part of it, but you can't have 10 shareholders trying to sell a business. That it'd be a nightmare.
Exactly, yeah. So you're one of the sort of few business owners we've had on the podcast that have sold. So can you share with our audience anything that you do differently in hindsight from through to the sale, and knowing what you know now, is there anything you've changed from day one of the business to add more value to ultimate exit?
For sure. I think it's really important at the start of your business. You can't answer every question, but it's good to think about it. What is the business I'm building? Am I building a time for money business, i.e., I'm almost just building myself a job? And none of these things are wrong, right? So hopefully people are like, well, shut up, right? None of these things are wrong, but it's just understand, what are you doing? What are you building? What's your aspirations? So building yourself a job is essentially, you might be essentially yourself or a team of one or two, and you're doing work for a person, and this is replacing your need for a salary, and perhaps you're earning more than a salary. Great. Okay, cool. The next one is I'm building a business which is going to create long-term profits coming back to me that I don't have a reason I don't want to sell. I want to have potentially I want to have a generational business, whatever that looks like. Or the third one is I'm building with the ambition that one day I'll exit. I don't know when, I don't know why, I don't know what the dollar figure is, but one day I think I'll exit because I think I'll do it again in a different sector. Great. Understanding that will then help you shape what is required from day one to put yourself in a better position when it comes time to sell. So we didn't have those answers in any way, shape, or form because, like I said, we had no idea what we were doing. So part of the merger came a lot of complexities from our business and the business we merged with that then cost us a lot more money when we sold the business that we had to reverse engineer.
Right.
And so what I mean by that is, for example, we had contracts for whatever reasons, shareholders agreements, things like that had to be rebuilt during the time of the sale. That cost us. So our legal bill for the sale was just $2.1 million.
Wow.
Because, they looked back over the course of 10 years and said, okay, where's all the documentation for here? Nothing was illegal, but it was just things were either, some things were on handshake agreements or some things, the customer contracts weren't aligned to the same type of contract because we had two merging entities. We had some things weren't even had a contract because none of it was thought about. So therefore it was a bit haphazard. And so we had to go back, reverse engineer it and get it back to the sale, which cost us a lot of money. Now, back to the advice, what would you do differently? Well, if I knew the answer, which, today, if I start my next business, I will know the answer to that. I will put in practice from day one things that will help me when I sell. So as simple as this, and people might even laugh at it, it's like, have all your contracts in a single place. Store that thing, store them. Don't leave them on your desktop. Don't leave them on a computer because one day your computer might crash. Store them securely on the cloud. So always build out that same library of contracts. If you're going to do a referral partner program or a work with another business as a joint venture, don't do it on a handshake. I know you have a lot of trust in that partner, but Document it, because when you're selling, the person that's going to buy you, they don't care about the trust. They care about the signature on a page, right?
Yep.
Next would be, I got a contract from ChatGPT and I signed it. Great. Well, when you go to sell, you're not going to be able to use that contract. So it's just having a little bit more attention and focus to realize that when you sell, there's going to be a thing called legal due diligence, and it's going to go far back, very far back, and it's going to be looking at things for 10 years. Some of the stuff was 15 years old, and so if you have some kind of rigor in place, it's going to help you and save you a lot of time and money.
Mm.
That's part one. Part two is just understanding that by knowing what your end outcome is. So, for example, I want to sell the business, then you have to understand the sector that you're getting into, because it changes things a lot. So what I mean by that is some businesses will have what we call a 2 to 4 times multiple of profit, because that business doesn't have that much tangible, saleable value. So what is that type of business? If you are a business that works one by one rather than having long-term contracts, you have a low multiple saleable business, because when someone's buying it, they can't bank on tomorrow that contract exists. So for example, we were in the tech space and we were also business to business, and we had long-term contracts. So when we had a client that was, let's say, $1 million a year, they're in a 3-year agreement. So when we sell the business, that person can know that that customer will be there for another 3 years. And so that increased our multiple. So we were, very fortunate. Our multiple of EBITDA or profit was 23 times.
Wow.
So it's a very high multiple. Why? Because we're in the right type of industry, sector, customer base to get a high multiple. So if you know and can ask these questions, you won't be shocked at the other end when it comes time to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, sorry to harp on about this, but obviously I learned a lot, and hopefully this is interesting for people.
Yes,
the last one would be, you have to, from an early stage, start thinking about succession. So if you want to sell your business, no one wants to buy your business if you are the bottleneck.
Mm.
So for example, in buying your business and this one founder, shareholder, if they leave, the business crumbles. So our role as shareholders, as founders, was like, how do I make myself redundant so that when I leave, nothing changes? And so it took a lot of time to do that. But if you're doing it from early stages and not always trying to hold the keys to the castle, when it comes time to sell, they'll do a key person analysis for everybody in the business, regardless of shareholders. And they'll go like, is there going to be a problem here if all the shareholders leave? And if the answer is yes, your business either value is less or they're not going to buy. And so you need to make sure you solve for the key risk people in your business so you can actually sell the business.
And it can impact on what they call earnouts and the like, and could end up costing the owners a fair bit of money if they haven't got those things in place.
Exactly.
Yeah, some great insights there, and certainly a lot of what you spoke about is part of our business transformation program in making sure businesses do essentially start at the end in mind. I think that's sort of a well-used sentence, but I think it's very true to your point. So, mate, our final 5 questions. So what do you think is the hardest thing in growing a business?
I think it's the unknown unknowns. So when I was with a guy today who's sharing a new business. In the early stage, it's all about blue sky, and you think about all the exciting things at the other end. Then you then have that's the tip of the iceberg, and then you have the iceberg below, which you cannot see. Those are your unknown unknowns, and there's just so many of them. Mm. And so I think that's the thing, because you can't prepare for them. So those are the things that stuff you up and create mental and emotional load.
Yeah. And have you got a favorite business book which has helped you the most?
There's so many that have shaped me. I think, when it's come to like mindset from like a sales perspective, probably the one of the most pivotal was, again, Grant Cardone's 10X rule, because it made me think a lot bigger. From inspired by just how are you even doing this would be Elon Musk's most recent book, because it's just incredible when you hear about the scale and the caliber and the brain and talent. And then lastly, from like a marketing perspective, I love the book called Delivering Happiness by Zappos, and just the way in which you think about different ways to market to people and delivering the feeling of something special.
Yeah, good one. And what about any great podcasts or online learning tools?
So it used to be the Diary of the CEO. That's recently shifted to a lot of health and fitness and Ozempic and random stuff. So I'd say for the business owner today, it has to be Alex Hormozi. Like, he's built 3 to 5 businesses. They've all had multi-millions and exited. And he now has acquisition.com, where he's buying and building businesses to get to 100 million plus revenue. It's the most tangible thing from a day to day from a business from anywhere from 0 to 100 mil. So it has to be that.
Yeah, he's certainly one of my favourites, and there's so much you can learn. He's just got a great way of in communicating his knowledge and experience.
100%.
And what's one tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
It has to be the self-learning. So there's no individual tool that I could tell you apart from the tool of accountability to yourself to make sure you're learning the right thing and you're implementing it. So there's there's some people that fall into the trap, which is like the self-help listening. It gives them the sense, the dopamine rush that they're doing. If you're not actioning something that you're learning, you're just it's just a waste of time essentially. So I think it's knowing that this is contextual to every single small business. You've got to be pushing your skills and knowledge, and you've got to be implementing it. So my thing was, every time I read a book, it's like, what am I actually doing tomorrow? And test and measure, is that something that works for me or not? Or else I'm just kind of wasting time.
Yeah. And finally, mate, what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out if you had the benefit of hindsight?
Yeah, I'd say you got this, little buddy. Just chin up. Chin up. You less years. We were.
Yeah, it's going to be a roller coaster. Look, I really appreciate your time, Frank. There's some. It's a great story as a backdrop. It's some great learnings that you've shared with our audience. I'm sure they'll get a lot out of it. So, thanks a lot. And just a little plug for your cookbook that you've been working on as part of a charity released in November. You just want to give a little plug to that.
Yeah, no worries. So just for everybody's context, prior to my time as in business, I used to be a chef. During the whole course of the business, including the sale, I would come home and I cook for my wife and I, or my wife, myself, my son, right until the end of selling the business. And so I'm really passionate. I love cooking food. You can do it fast, you can do it easy, and you can do it nutritiously. Post selling the business, I realized that I don't want to just go into the next business straight away and go next, and then I'm dead. So I want to use the skill set that I have to give beyond just my family. And so I decided to write a cookbook called Eat with Purpose that's designed for high performance people. So built to cook meals within 30 minutes. And 100% of the revenue goes to charity. So I'm funding the cost of the book, the marketing, etc., and all of the money will go to charity to ensure that I'm doing something that has a bit more purpose, hence the Eat with Purpose, than just myself for my time currently.
Yeah, that's a great initiative, and they say sort of paying back in some ways and also paying forward. So well done to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Well, all the best, and I'll sort of look forward to sort of watching and seeing what you do next.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thanks, mate.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.